Well, good afternoon and good morning to all the people that are busy joining at the moment. My name is Sharon Olivier and I'll be your host for this webinar on emotional resilience and the art of reframing. While we wait for people to join, I'd love to just hear in the chat box from the ones who have already joined, where are you dialing in from? Which country are you dialing in from? So feel free to use the chat function and just let us know. UK, Luxembourg, okay, Germany, Belgium, Scotland, Slovakia. Brilliant. What an international group we have today. Israel, Japan, Germany, Czech, Oman, Korea, Brazil. Wow, fantastic. We've had an overwhelming number of people registering for this webinar. And it just tells me how really in need people are of this particular topic during these difficult times. So I'm so pleased to be with you today and to do this session with you. Thank you. I think we still have a few joining. Okay, but I'm going to get going. And as the chat says, that we are going to do a Q&A session at the time, but the session is fairly interactive. It's a very large number of people on this call, but it is fairly interactive. There's going to be certain exercises where I'm going to ask you to respond in the chat. There's also going to be one short poll that we do. And then the last 10 to 15 minutes is going to be using the Q&A function, where you can please post your questions. So let me start off then by introducing the organization that I have the privilege to be part of. It's EF, which stands for Education First, that works with Hult Ashridge, one company. We're sister companies now. EF specializes in language training, cultural exchange programs, educational travel, and international business school Hult that specializes specifically in business degrees, undergraduate and postgraduate, partnering with Ashridge. A lot of you might already have been part of Ashridge programs. Ashridge specializes in executive education. My job is, I have the privilege of creating leadership, immersive leadership experiences for executives that come to Ashridge, or custom programs where we go out to them. Ashridge Hult is a triple accredited leading international business school. We've been around for over 60 years, and our experience is specifically in delivering executive education to global businesses around the world. We have 4 different campuses on 4 different continents. The one that you see here behind me is the beautiful campus in London, 30 minutes outside of London, in Hertfordshire, called Ashridge Executive Education. And I live actually just down the road from this campus here in Hertfordshire. And then we have one in Dubai, San Francisco, and Hong Kong. And part of our offering is, in fact, these webinars that you are part of today, to give you a taster of the kind of work that we do at Ashridge. So a little bit about me. I'm South African, as you might hear from the accent. I have been with Ashridge here in the UK for 7 years. We did a big immigration when I turned 50 with my husband Frederick and my son Joshua. We moved from South Africa to the UK. And I am now a full-time faculty member in the leadership, development, and HR space, and specifically specializing in the inner world of leaders. The personal resilience, the intelligences, the ability to manage our inner world is so important for us to be effective in the outer world. And I'm particularly keen on how to develop those resiliences and intelligences that help us to cope and to respond well to whatever's happening in the outer world. And that's what the session is all about today. I will share a little bit about my own story in a hope that you'll be encouraged to get some inspiration on reframing some of the adversities and difficulties that you find yourself in today. I studied something called neuro-linguistic programming, the art of rewiring the brain, and also something called PNI, psychoneuroimmunology, which is how our thoughts and our emotions affect our physical well-being and our health. And I'll be sharing some of my experience and studies and research with you today on that, because the topic of today is how we manage our emotional diet when we go through times like we are right now in the midst of COVID. You know, we had this incredible hope that COVID was over, and people started pinning all their happiness and optimism on that hope and that dream, only to be crushed again with a second wave. And we're having a lot of people at the moment struggling with exhaustion, burnout, struggling to reframe, struggling to stay positive and to manage their isolation, their loneliness during this time. And so this session is all about that. I'm hoping to leave you with some very practical ideas and some inspiration as how you can reframe and work with your emotions on a more proactive basis as a result of the session today. So I just recently read that a big study that was done by King's College recently, a few months ago, with 3,000 adults in the UK, where they found that 57% reported symptoms of anxiety and 64% have reported common signs of depression. It's at an all-time high. Another study here in the UK found that the big three things that people are struggling with is the constant rumination and worry about contracting COVID. People are living with a baseline level of fear all the time. It's incredible. We've actually moved, we're going to South Africa on Saturday this week. And two of my friends in South Africa have said, we don't feel that we can even spend time with you because we're so worried about COVID and contracting. They're isolating to a high level. Lots of fear, lots of rumination, lots of anxiety about contracting COVID. And then another big one is loneliness. People struggling with the feelings of isolation, especially those that are single, that are living alone at home. Because at the end of the day, we are social beings. We're not meant to live in isolation. And I think the feeling of loneliness is exacerbating the anxiety and the stress that people are feeling. And thirdly, the ability to reframe their thoughts, the ability to think positively and to hang on to their hope, their positivity, their appreciation, and to stay strong within themselves seem to be major issues at the moment. And that's why Sophie at EF has asked me to do this webinar with you today, because this is really my passion area. I've been through a lot myself in my life. And it's during these times of emotional strain and stress and exhaustion and burnout that emotional diet and the ability to reframe becomes an essential, crucial life skill. So let's do a quick poll just to see where you're at today. And of course, this is confidential. All we see is the numbers. So in front of you, you'll see a little screen, a little box that asks you three questions. On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate your current stress levels? Not stressed at all, 1, very stressed, extremely stressed, 10. So go ahead and do that and then move to the next question, which says, to what extent is your stress affecting your physical well-being? That means your health, aches and pains, headaches, anxiety, spastic colon, diarrhea, constipation. You know, they say that the colon is the second brain and that stress immediately affects the colon with all sorts of interesting symptoms. And then, of course, the lower back, the upper back, the headaches, waking up with headaches. And then emotionally, how's it affecting you? Your thoughts, your anxiety levels, your ability to think clearly, to stay calm, how's it affecting that? So just page through using that little gray bar on the side to answer all three questions. Okay, so Sophie, let's end the poll and see what we have. Okay, so there you see 7 being the highest, 7 and 8. So it's leaning definitely above average. If you look at 5 as being average, can you see they're 29% at 7, 18% at 8. So fairly high levels of stress. On the next question, how's it affecting our physical well-being? Pretty much in the middle, 2, 3, and 4, with the highest being 4. And if we look at how it's affecting our emotional level, there's much higher there. Can you see? So that's probably why you've registered to join me today, is because of the emotional, mental impact being the highest. Thank you very much for sharing that. So let's have a quick look at how stress affects us and how specifically it affects our ability to perform. I see we've got some raised hands there. If I can't talk to you, but you can put a chat into the chat function. If you have something that you'd like to ask or say, please just use the chat function. Okay. Let me have a quick look there. All right, brilliant. So let's just have a quick look then at how stress affects performance. If you look at the one side of the axis at the bottom being how stress or the stretch and challenge increases over time, and the other side is what happens to your performance. We all need a certain level of stress to get us going. How we call that positive stress or eustress, they sometimes call it, healthy pressure. And then it can even reach an optimal level. You know, when you're feeling stretched, but still quite competent and positive, I can handle this, I can do this, I'm excited about it. If it increases even further, what may happen with you is that you move into something called hyperreactivity, which is a sense of, you know, that picture where the chickens with the head chopped off, where they just run and there's blood everywhere. You're touching this and touching that like crazy. You think that you're very effective. You believe you're effective, but you're actually not. It's the phase of delusion. You're just touching things, touching this, but you're not doing anything properly. And even your time with your children and your partners is not done properly. It's rushed. Hyperreactivity. If stress and pressure increases even further, we move into emotional and physical exhaustion, and that can lead to damage to health and even emotional breakdown, and sometimes even a physical breakdown. 80% of all illnesses are linked to stress. Reason being that stress has an impact on your immune system. It compromises your immune system. And we all know that we need a healthy immune system to be able to fight off and hold us strong against the bugs flying around and even cancers. A strong immune system is constantly regulating and killing off the cancer cells that are naturally being produced in the body as part of normal functioning. So this is a very sad cycle that happens if people are not resilient and they're allowing the pressure of their work or the pressure of their life to cause them to go into this hyperreactivity and eventually into emotional exhaustion. And that's the place of stress. And what it needs is a perception change. And this is a bit of a stretch and a bit of a provocative thing I'm saying. How is it possible that you can have two people in exactly the same roles? I've seen this so much. They're senior leaders, similar roles, similar budgets, all managing thousands of pounds, thousands of people. One person responds with optimism and excitement as the stress increases, and the second person starts collapsing. So the point is that it's not to do with how pressure and stress increases out there. It's your capacity to change your perception and to reframe how you respond to the things that's happening out there. I often say to people, you know, shit happens. It's in the classics, that's what they say, shit happens. Our life on this planet is filled with pain. It's filled with adversity. If we allow all the adversities of life to break us down physically and emotionally, we're not going to be able to become stronger with life's experience. We'll become weaker with life's experience. And that, for me, is the essence of reframing. It's knowing that how you respond to the outer world is absolutely your choice. It's a matter of choosing your perception, choosing your response. Not easy, but possible. And that's what reframing is all about. So resilience is actually this curve here, that even if pressure increases over time, you're able to control how you respond and how you perceive that pressure. And that's why you have such different people with such different responses in the same circumstances. So let's look at what resilience really is. For me, a picture speaks 1,000 words. And I love this picture of the tree. The tree is being thrown to the right by the storms of life, you know, by the rivers and the storms, and it starts to crack. And yet in front of the tree is that flexible reed. Can you see it there? As life throws it this way, it just comes back to center. As life throws it that way, it just comes back to center. And that's what resilience is for me. It's not bouncing back, as many people say. It's actually the capacity to bend and come back to your center, to bend and come back to your center, but coming back stronger, really, and more flexible. Because the more you're asked to bend, the more flexible and strong you become. And this is what agility is really all about. Not to crack, but to allow life to throw you in that way, but always know who you are. Always know who you are and what it is that the essence, your essential self, what you bring to the world, that is the center that you hold dear. And that's what you come back to. And you always, you know, hopefully come back stronger so that you can be an inspiration to others that are going through difficult times rather than cracking under pressure. And sometimes we do crack a little bit, and we have to go through a grief cycle of crying, gnashing of teeth, going into the dip. Nothing wrong with that. But the problem is when you get stuck there for months and for years and you're not able to find who you are, your center. I see some of you are raising your hands. We will have an opportunity for those questions to be addressed. So please hang on to them. So resilience then has 4 key domains. Physical, which we all know about. You know, many wellness programs only talk about the physical, which is diet and exercise, physical durability and strength. And then the mental, which is how flexible you are mentally, your span of focus, your ability to concentrate, to hold multiple perspectives. But few resilience programs in companies deal with emotional and spiritual resilience. So emotional would be your ability to be flexible emotionally, to be able to hold different perspectives and not hold them too tightly. Have a positive outlook, the ability to reframe, to have a positive outlook, to self-regulate your emotions. But before you can do that, you need to know your emotions. And then spiritual is your why. It's not religion. Spiritual is your sense of purpose, knowing yourself and what it is that you bring to the world and holding that dear, your why, your commitment to what you believe, your values, and then to be very tolerating of other people's different values and perceptions and just embracing them as different to yourself. So we're going to have a closer look now at the emotional, spiritual part of resilience in this session. And I thought that I would share a very personal story with you in the hope that would inspire you to reframe some of the stories that you might be experiencing right now at the moment. That's why I tell the story, because I think it depicts reframing in a very, very clear way. It was a story that happened in my life probably about 10 years ago now, that was the inspiration for my husband and I to write this book that you see called Diamonds in the Dust. When we met as a couple, we had a common dream, a shared dream of starting a center of healing and growth, a retreat center on the banks of a river in Johannesburg. We called it Still Point Country Haven. And it was a place where people would come for resilience workshops and retreats to rejuvenate and to receive counseling and teaching around the concept of resilience. But we were very nervous because it took a big investment and we weren't really property developers and we weren't really, you know, in the hospitality industry. And I was pushing very hard that we should own the place, you know, that we need to find the center and own the center. And eventually we found a place and we were very nervous. We kept it for 6-7 years before we actually took the brave step of putting money in. And it was quite a few million to invest in this property. We found a project manager who was also an architect. He seemed amazing. He had all the credentials. We did reference checks on him, and he started to build this place, which consisted of 20 rooms with meditation gardens, 3 conference rooms, even a big meeting area where you could run large-scale events. And big dream, very big vision, probably too big. And unfortunately, it didn't work out for us financially. We made some few fundamental mistakes, and I think some wrong directions were taken along the way, specifically in the people that we chose as partners. We did manage, however, to create quite a big piece of it. There you can see some photographs of it. We did manage to do a whole section of it, and it was beautiful. One thing that we did is we had this philosophy of making the useless useful. So in that bathroom there, you can see all sorts of stones and sticks and wood from the garden that we turned into useful products in our designs. I was personally involved in decorating every single room here. So we certainly managed to make a good start. But unfortunately, with this project manager, it ended up that he was not very confident. He went 5 times over budget and we ran out of money and we couldn't finish. And we had to find an investor. The person we found was our accountant at the time, put some money in. We had a massive clash with him. We had a very different vision. He was pushing for a commercial hotel. We wanted a wellness center. And in the end, after about 5 years, there was this really painful situation where he said, look, I buy you out or you buy me out. We can't work together. Knowing full well, we put all our pension money. We had nothing left. We had lost everything. He knew that we couldn't buy him out. And eventually then we had to give up on that dream. Very tough. And I experienced stress tremendously, not sleeping well at night, eating badly, ruminating, getting ratty, feeling bitter and angry towards that person. It was quite something. And it eventually meant that we had to release this dream. We had to release this life dream. And there was a time then where we had made that conscious decision. We went away to Cape Town for 10 days for a time of reflection and reframing. It was during this time that my husband, who's quite a spiritual person, was walking through the property. Here you see some of the unfinished bits. It was still a mess. Half of it still looked like this. And the sad part is that the trees that we loved so much, that were filled with chameleons and bush babies and snakes in Africa, were all, experiencing this. This partner was coming along with a truck and cutting down trees. It was a total mess. And my husband was walking through this property one day, feeling really anxious and stressed. And he was saying, why? Why did this happen to us? We had such a clear vision. And now all I see is rubbish and dust everywhere and paint and bricks. And he got a very interesting insight that day. The insight that he got was, stop looking at the dust. Look a bit harder, look a bit closer, and you'll find some tremendous diamonds in this dust. He then came back to me and he shared this insight that he'd got. We decided then to just break away for 10 days to Cape Town and reflect. What are the diamonds in this dust? We've reached a point we have to release this dream. And it was really painful. What are the diamonds? And we did some meditation, reflection. We even did some fasting over that period, really just trying to reframe this and looking at the diamonds. And I started finding some diamonds, actually. When I shifted my perception, I started finding some diamonds. And I knew that if I didn't focus on the diamonds, I'd spend the rest of my life angry and bitter with that person, with this project, with each other as a partnership. It really was going to mess me up physically and emotionally. So I started looking at the diamonds, actively looking at the diamonds. One of them, stick to your knitting, Sharon. Your passion and your skill is to inspire and to teach and to coach. You're not meant to be in the hospitality industry. I was spending so much time worrying about the muffins, the money, the salaries, the paintings, the sheets. I was actually not really very present in the work that I was forming this place to do in the first place. Secondly, how to choose and not choose a business partner with a shared sense of purpose and values. Another big diamond in the dust. And so we started writing up the diamonds in the dust. And we met other people who were also going through their reframing processes. And the 5 of us got together and we published that book, Diamonds in the Dust, which tells the story. And that story has inspired so many other people to reframe. We came back and with a very good friend, we went into a ritual where we took a big walk up this mountain in Magaliesburg in South Africa, a big walk up this mountain with the intention of when we get to the top of this mountain, we will actively release, emotionally release this dream and move on with our lives. And that was quite a moment here. You can see the picture. That moment of release was quite something. And there you have my husband kind of got his arm around me and I had to kind of say goodbye to that dream. But this is where the work really started. This is where the work started of how do we help other people to do emotional reframing. And that led me to study this thing called emotional diet, that so many companies are just talking about physical diet in their wellness programs. What about emotional diet? How do we choose our thoughts and our emotions on a daily basis rather than them choosing us? And I've started a wonderful ritual every morning. In the morning, and I do this about 3 times a week, I would sit down in the morning with a bit of yoga, to have a practice of yoga, and then just sit for 5 minutes and ask myself 2 questions. And these questions are, what am I thinking and feeling right now? Just close my eyes and notice. And maybe you can do that right here with me now. Close your eyes and just notice. What's going on for you right now? What are your thoughts? What are your emotions? Where in your body do you feel it? Just take a deep breath. Just focus on that. And then the second question is, what do I want to think and feel right now? What do I want to think and feel right now? That's how we start with emotional diet. That capacity to be able to choose our thoughts and our emotions on a daily basis. And then you think forward towards your day to come. How will I take that into my 9 o'clock meeting, my 4 o'clock meeting, my team meeting later on this afternoon? How am I going to be? What emotions do I want to show? Remember, as leaders, there's this thing called emotional contagion. What you feel become contagious. It's a virus that other people catch, hopefully not the COVID, but it's an emotional virus that people catch. And the Heart Math Institute found that if you measure electromagnetically the energy from the heart, you can measure it 3 meters from the human body. And so if you're feeling anxious, angry, bitter, 3 meters away from your body when you walk into a room, people will feel that. And of course, as we start to lead virtually, that is portrayed in our eyes and in our voice, in our virtual presence, people can also feel it. So this guy called David Hawkins did a wonderful study where he looked at how different emotional states affect our physiology. And he did that through muscle testing, sort of through the arm, behavioral kinesiology it's called. And he found that certain emotions have a weakening effect on the body and others have a strengthening effect on the body. And he ranked them on a scale of 0 to 1,000. And this is what he found. Shame, guilt, apathy, anguish and grief, fear, craving, anger, pride, courage to explore, he called the lower emotions or the lower motivations. So some of you who have experienced depression will know all about the bottom 3, apathy, guilt, shame, where you feel so depressed, you just want to put the duvet over your head and not see a soul. You just want to go into hibernation. That's often accompanied by guilt, because now you're feeling guilty that you're not out there being happy. You feel guilty that you're feeling depressed. It's got a very weakening effect on the physiology. Fear is more strengthening than that. Craving, anger, strengthening. Still negative emotions, but more strengthening. You'll know that when you are going through a disappointment, someone's hurt you, you first feel sorry for yourself, the anguish and the grief, and then fearful, and then you get angry with them, and that gives you energy to do something, and sometimes even to retaliate or to take revenge. Anger gives you more energy. Pride is about the ego. I will show them I'm okay. Courage to explore is the turning point where fear gets replaced with curiosity, where you start saying to yourself, there must be another way of being. That's what happened to me in Cape Town. I started saying, I have to find the diamonds in this dust because I can't live my life feeling bitter. And I can honestly say to you today that I feel not even a tinge of anger or disappointment or bitterness from that experience today. So successful was that reframing exercise. So that's what happens at 200. It's the reframing. It's the shifting your fear to curiosity and say, that's interesting. How could I show up differently in the world with this thing? How can I shift this energy? I'm curious, what will happen with this? What are the diamonds in the dust here? And that opens up the space for some of these. Neutrality, cooperation and willingness, self-acceptance, mastery, reason, love, joy, peace, higher service. Very different energy. This is where the inner calm and the curiosity becomes your normal state. The question to you is, where do you hang out on the scale? I know that you move up and down, but if you say, what's your baseline state? What's your baseline emotional state? What would that be? Where do you hang out? Hawkins says that roughly 80% of the population live below the black line. If you look at the news, and there's a lot of pain, anger, hurt in the world at the moment. So most people are living out below the waterline, that black line there. Another study found, and this is quite a shocking one, they took people over a period of 6 hours on the bottom axis and measured the strength of their immune system, IgA, on the left. IgA is the T killer cell production in the immune system that gets measured in the saliva. They took people through 5 minutes of anger, that's the gray bar. And can you see the blue line here? Immune system activated, and then took 6 hours to recover from 5 minutes of anger. And it ends up weaker than where it started. So if you get yourself into an emotional state of anger for 5 minutes, or stress, say for example, you've got road rage on your way to work, or you open your email and you're freaking out with the emails or with the kids at home, that takes your immune system 6 hours to recover. That's quite scary. The silver lining on this cloud is that 5 minutes of compassion boosts your immune system for 6 hours, and it ends up stronger. Can you see the black line? Ends up stronger than where it started. Compassion is not sympathy. Compassion is a sense of connection and care. You can even feel compassion when you walk into nature. Just spending 5 minutes in nature, standing under a tree, feeling a sense of connection with the birds, with the trees, with the air, that boosts your immune system. And you will all know that people that are driven, angry, bitter, they often have the stress symptoms, the emotional stress diseases that come with being a driver, angry kind of personality. So we have to find this balance, and we must watch our emotional diet and not get into the anger in the first place. I think that's the big thing, to try not to go there in the first place, by hoping that you will find some practices that you can do that will help you to reframe that. Why does this happen? Well, if you look at the chemicals and the hormones, there's these two that work in tandem, and I'm oversimplifying this horribly. Cortisol, the stress hormone. So some cortisol is good and necessary. We need cortisol to get going in the morning, but too much cortisol makes us feel really bad. Cortisol is stimulated by the emotions of anxiety, withdrawal, fear, and helplessness. They say that the mother of all negative emotions is where you feel that you've got no sense of purpose and helpless to do anything about it. Helpless, hopeless. So that stimulates cortisol. Now, the good news is that there's the opposite of cortisol is DHEA, which is the mother of all the good hormones, like, for example, dopamine and serotonin and oxytocin, is all stimulated by DHEA. They call it the anti-aging or the vitality hormone. It actually also, reduces the effects of aging. Stimulated by curiosity, appreciation, love, care, connectedness with others, connectedness with nature. Now, studies have found by the Heart Math Institute that if you can bring your stress levels and your cortisol down by a mere 23%, DHEA goes up by 100. They work in tandem like that. And the good news is that you can also find DHEA tablets and injections, not clinically trialed in all countries, but certainly it is there. But I think the more important thing is that your body is a chemist. And if we can manage our emotional diet and be good at reframing, we can stimulate those emotions, curiosity, appreciation, love, care. That automatically pushes up cortisol. And the effect is immediate, as you saw in the previous graph. 5 minutes of compassion boosts your immune system for 6 hours. And that's why people can get sick or well physically by managing their emotional diet. I'm sure you know of people in your life that have been ill or in hospital, and just because of their mindset and their ability to reframe, have sped up their healing process, whereas others that are very negative and gone into depression have slowed down their physical healing process. So let's get practical. And I'd like to share with you 10 important resilience practices. And I'm going to ask you to do a little test. If you can say yes to a practice, you need to grab a pen and paper. If you say yes to it, give yourself 1 point. And if you can say no, it's 0, no half points allowed. And at the end, I'm going to ask you what your score was out of 10. Are you ready? Grab a pen and paper. Number 1. You have a good belly laugh at least once a week. I've done so much research on laughter and medicine. Have a look at that on the internet, laughter and medicine. I've just recently read there was a study in Norway that found that a good sense of humor prolonged longevity, life, by 7 years on average. Another study found that people who laugh on a daily basis on average live 12 years longer. Why is that? A good laugh brings down cortisol by about 40%. And laughing for about 5 minutes burns about 20 calories. Did you know that? It's also a good weight loss technique. So people who laugh reduce stress instantaneously. Now, some of you might have kids at home, kids under the age of 10. What a gift that is. Because you know that children under the age of 10 are laughing 300 times a day, and adults only 5 times a day. So if your child starts to laugh, why not laugh with them? Why are we telling them to shut up, be quiet, especially in the back seat of the car? Why don't we take ourselves a little less seriously? And when the children are silly, when they dance, when they scream, when they laugh, why don't we join them? Laughter is the best medicine, and people who laugh live longer and have 64% less visits to a medical doctor. Another longitudinal study that was done over many years. Number 2, you make sure that you have me time for at least 2 hours every week. Me time is where you do something for yourself, by yourself, to recharge your battery. You book it in your calendar, time with me. That might be walking in a forest, reading a novel, playing a musical instrument, gardening, just sitting in a coffee shop, watching the people, something you do by yourself, for yourself, to recharge your battery. We are made of energy. We are energetic beings, and we're constantly giving energy to our kids, to our partners, to our bosses, and not spending enough time recharging the battery. Very important. My family know that Saturday afternoon is my time in the Ashridge forest with my dog, just me and the dog. We go, we meditate, we walk, and we just recharge our battery. And by the way, you can make me time a practice in the whole family, that your kids, your husband, your wife, your partner, everybody is allowed their me time, and it becomes part of your language in the home. Number 3, you make time at least 20 minutes for quiet prayer, contemplation, reflection, journaling, or meditation at least 3 times a week. That's to find your inner calm. What a way to start a morning. If you just have 5-10 minutes of this, contemplation, journaling, meditation, mindfulness, what a way to start the day. Number 4, you seek and receive developmental feedback at work at least 2 or 3 times a year, and you act on it. We can't grow and learn without feedback, and we should request feedback to keep growing and learning, because often we have these blind spots. We don't know what we're doing to piss people off, those irritating habits that we have. And so I really think that this is an important practice for continuous growth. Number 5, you feel you have a friend at work that you can talk and trust, that you can trust and talk to. We are social beings. That's why people are struggling so much with the isolation of COVID. We need to know that there's somebody that's there for us. A recent study found that social connection had the highest correlation to well-being and happiness compared to all the other practice. The fact that we have a social support system is absolutely important. Number 6, you feel that you are able to bring your best self or your strengths to work on most days. Being your true self. So for example, if your particular essence or strength is strategic insight or challenge or creativity or ability to care for others, are you able to bring that to work on most days? Or are you being asked by your job to be somebody that you are not? It takes an extrovert 4 times the amount of energy to do introvert work, like sitting in a closed office doing research, than it would for an introvert. Takes an introvert 4 times the amount of energy to do extrovert kind of work, socializing, being with people, selling. So being true to yourself and actually knowing your strengths is absolutely important. Number 7, you have a habit generally of finding diamonds in the dust, of reframing, of saying, what are the diamonds, and not getting stuck in the dust. That is your habit. That's your pattern. Number 8, you regularly reflect on things that you are grateful for. My mother always used to say, Sharon, count your blessings. Count your blessings before you go to sleep at night. What are the 10 things that you really feel grateful for today? And they found, the work of Martin Seligman in the field of positive psychology found that people who actually wrote it down, kept a gratitude journal, had far higher levels of well-being, less levels of depression than those who didn't keep a gratitude journal. A friend of mine, Amy Bradley, recently gave me a gratitude journal, thin little book that I fit into my handbag. When I'm sitting in a restaurant waiting for somebody or waiting for a meeting to start, just jot down 2 or 3 things that I'm grateful for and allow that to be your last thought. If you struggle to sleep at night or you wake up at 3 a.m., rather than thinking about the things that are worrying you, start listing in your mind and feeling in your body the things that you're really grateful for, because the cortisol will be reduced straight away. The reason we wake up at 3 a.m. or 4 a.m. is because your body starts naturally producing cortisol so that you're wide awake by 6 when the light comes up, when the sun rises. But if you've already got a residual high level of cortisol because of your stressful thoughts, and the body starts producing cortisol at 3 a.m., you'll be wide awake and not be able to sleep again. So to get to sleep well, we need to address our cortisol problem through actively working on reframing some of the things that are worrying us. Number 9, you are able to set boundaries around work and family and me time. With COVID, many people have told me they're struggling with boundaries. They're working till 10 o'clock because they're sitting at their computer, they're at home, they're dealing with the kids, They're running between meetings to cook the dinner and they're not putting clear boundaries. This is my family time. This is my me time. It's become crucially important for you now to be stricter about your boundaries for exercise and for time for family. Number 10 is the exercise thing. We all know this. Exercise is another very quick way to reduce cortisol and to increase the endorphins that makes you feel good and reduce your stress. Are you exercising for at least 20, 30 minutes 3 times a week? And then I'm going to give you a bonus point for this killer one. This is probably number 1. Are you sleeping 7 to 8 hours on most nights? Everything becomes a mountain instead of a molehill when we're lacking sleep. Exhaustion makes discipline very difficult. It's very hard to eat well when you're exhausted. It's very hard to even think about exercising when you're exhausted. So getting your sleep ritual in sync is really important. Okay. So let's see on the chat line what your score is. Could you enter your score on the chat? Let's have a look. I'm going to go into the chat. Okay, we've got 5 7s. We've got the bonus. Well done. 6, 4, 9. We've got some 9s. Fantastic. Some 3s. By the way, the average score is normally 3 or 4. So if you've got anything over 3 or 4, you're doing above average. Fantastic. Next question is, could you commit as a result of today to one thing that you can start doing that you're not already doing? We call it the millimeter miracle. The millimeter miracle. Do one thing, make it a habit, and then choose the next thing. Do one thing until it becomes part of who you are before you choose the next. So can I ask you in the chat just to put one thing that you commit to? Just write the number of the one thing that you make as your personal commitment today. Wonderful. We got lots of 2s and 3s coming through, and a 10 and an 8. Thank you. Excellent. So if I had to summarize this, I would say the big thing is to keep the balance between active and reflective time in your life. Sympathetic nervous system is stimulated by the go, go, go. The parasympathetic is stimulated when you're able to take a breath and to find your space and to find your inner calm. And if we don't hold this balance, we're going to burn out. Yeah? You have to be rigidly and very, very strong with your family about having your reflective time. And it needs to be part of your daily routine. If you can do that, you're not going to have burnout and exhaustion. So important. Now, what trips us up in life is something called a black widow spider. This is what prevents us from being successful with these practices. I use the black widow spider here as a metaphor because I'm from Africa. I love to use these metaphors, and the black widow spider is from Africa. Imagine a web, and in the web there's a spider. The web represents, and the spider represents your sensitive issues, your hot buttons, your inner critic. Some of us have got really hot spots in our life about rejection. We feel rejection very quickly. There's an email that comes from the boss and you're not included in the task team or the project, immediately feel rejected. Some of us have got issues around recognition. We feel we need recognition all the time. And if we don't get the recognition, we feel that there's something wrong with us. And our inner critic saying, you're not good enough. They're better than you. You're not going to make it. The voice in the ear. So the black widow spider is that inner critic. It's that voice in the head that holds you back. You know, I'm not able to reframe. I'm not strong enough. I'm not able to be disciplined. It's that voice that holds you back. And the big thing with the black widow spider is that we need to learn how to know it and how to love it and how to deal with it. Are you aware of your black widow? Are you aware? Yeah. I fondly call my black widow spider Arthur. I don't know where I came on that name. And when he starts to speak, I say, I hear you. I know you. You're there again. Because so often, think about it, we blame other people. It's their fault. They should recognize me more. My boss should give me more recognition. My husband should buy me more flowers. Should kills us, this word should. And the black widow spider is the thing that trips you up. You know, you're not good enough. That inner critic. And the starting point is to be aware, self-awareness of your black widow, and to know what it's triggered by. You know, my black widow is triggered by this whole thing of recognition, because I was an only child My mother used to put me on a pedestal and say, Sharon, you can do anything you put your mind to. Nothing's impossible for you. And I grew up believing that, that I was, and even today, when people tell me you can't do something or we don't want you to be part of this, I feel very offended because I believe that that I should be out there, that I should be the one leading it. And I need that recognition because that's my black widow spider, you're not special enough, chirping in my ear. And the big thing is not to get angry because the black widow is there to protect you. It's a defense mechanism. And it's a life skill to be able to reframe the black widow. And so I want to leave you on this webinar with 3 P words. And this was developed by myself and Celine Morin, who's a wellness specialist, inspired originally by the work of Richard Rudd, who wrote a book called The Gene Keys. And the 3 P's that I'd like to leave with you is pause, pivot, practice, purpose. And this is to help you to reframe the black widow and to work with embracing some of these new emotional resilience practices. Let's start with pause. Pause is the ability to take a breath and to notice. We wouldn't have beautiful music if it wasn't for the pauses between the notes. The tango wouldn't be a beautiful dance if there wasn't a pause in the dance. So the pause is your capacity to say, slow down, Sharon, take a breath, step onto the balcony. You're on the dance floor doing your thing. Are you able to step away from yourself at the same time and notice what you're thinking, notice what you're feeling, and ask yourself, what do I want to think? What do I want to feel today? We call it meta-awareness, the ability to take distance from yourself. Very important. Once you can pause and take a breath and make this a habit to pause, you can move into pivot. And pivot is where you befriend the black widow spider and you stop the shouldn't language. They shouldn't, he shouldn't. And you say, okay, Arthur, there you are. I see you. I hear you. It's okay. I know you're trying to protect me, but right here, right now, I'm going to make this choice. I'm going to realize it's not their problem, but it's me. It's me. It's my inner critic. And I'm going to choose a different response. Rather than reacting as I did in the past, I'm going to choose another response. So I'm going to move from reacting to being response-able. Response-able. That's the reframe. The pausing and the breathing allows you to pivot, to say, okay, what's really going on here? This is interesting. Rather than this is a disaster, you say, this is interesting. I hear you. Okay, so what can I do differently? How can I respond differently? And what helps you tremendously is to remember who you are, which is the purpose part. We all have a spice. Some of us bring the pepper, some of us bring the salt, some of us bring the turmeric to life. Like you have a unique thumbprint, all of us has a unique essence. And when I'm feeling stretched and nervous and frightened, the first thing I remind myself, who are you, Sharon? We started that center. It was actually registered as the Center of Light, Love, and Laughter. And I sometimes have to remind myself, Sharon, how can you bring light, love, and laughter to this anxiety, to this COVID, to this next meeting? What is your essence? What are you blessed with? Who are you? So as soon as you're feeling thrown by the stresses and strains of life, come back to your center, the who you are, the spice that you bring, the light that you shine into a dark situation, and to be that. So I'd like to leave you with those 3 words: pause, pivot, practice, purpose. And of course, HR can do a huge amount to help organizations become more resilient. They can create a clear business case for resilience. They can create awareness of resilience by offering skills development like we're doing today in emotional resilience. They can signpost a range of practical habits that the organization can start to embrace. And it can be part of a platform, the technology, the digital, the social media, these habits could be published. They could also coach and counseling, bring services to help people during these times. And they could help teams to create more human moments, having buddy partners in teams, having a human moment at the start of every meeting, allowing people to check in as human beings rather than just human resources. So much that can be done at an organizational level. And at Ashridge, it's these kinds of things that we help to build into HR programs, into organizational and leadership programs. It starts with leadership. And that's why we put such an important emphasis on leadership development in Ashridge. So resilience is a big part of what we offer. And we have our own resilience questionnaire where people can do reflection and so forth on their own particular aspects of resilience also. So I'd like to end there and prompt you to think very seriously in your life about how you might reframe some of your disempowering patterns that are sparked by your Black Widow. What is the very first next step that you might take as a result of today? And what support do you need from others, from your partners, from your teams, to enable you to become more resilient? So Sophie, let's move to some Q&A. We've got 10 minutes. I'm going to open up the Q&A and respond to some of your questions. Okay. So the first question is, any tips to wind down and switch off when connected to digital channels all day? That's a brilliant question. You know, not only does it distract your mind, but the waves from your technology, you know, has also been proven to be very bad. So one thing I've tried is that I've bought myself an electric alarm clock, an old-fashioned electric alarm clock, and I've now started actually switching my phone off. I have a ritual which consists of 30 minutes or 60 minutes before you go to bed, which is a ritual, which is your sleep ritual, which can consist of a bath, candles, listening to some calming music, doing a meditation. But it's really important that you switch your phones off and that you cool your room down, because our body temperatures drop. And so we need to have a cooler room. Even in winter, I open the bedroom window and get rid of technology. And also not to have your emails pinging through with an audible sound, I think is very important. But that you make a specific time in your day, like the first 30 minutes is my email response time rather than as they come in. To have boundaries around responding to technology is really important. We've got another question that says, my problem is I cannot tolerate opinions and beliefs related to politics that are completely wrong, especially when it's extremist. It really throws me off. That's your Black Widow. What is it that creates such a strong emotional reaction in you? Why should anything actually create such a strong emotional reaction? It says to me there's work to be done. Any negative emotion that you feel, any anger, any disgust, is almost a little red line. There's work to be done there. Why are we not able to just let it be like, you know, water off a duck's back? It's their opinion. They're entitled to it. I know who I am. I know what I bring. I know what my views are. And I'm prepared to just accept people are different to me. Not an easy one, I know, because it sparks us. But the Black Widow has been woken up there. There's something in you about right and wrong and fairness that's been sparked in you that I think needs to be looked at. There's a challenge. Resilience is very personal to each individual. What's a good approach to talk about resilience at a team or organizational level without trying to unify? I think if we can provide frameworks or lenses and diagnostic tools for people to look at their resilience and to see how each individual resilience is different, and then to give a range of strategies that people can choose, pick and choose from, and then to allocate coaches and counselors in the organization, it makes it very individualistic. Because you're right, it's a very personal choice. Question from Daniel. We can train in many ways, but can our compassion be trained? Yeah, that's an interesting one. My experience, Daniel, is that compassion often comes with your own painful experiences. Sometimes people struggle to show compassion when they haven't felt real pain themselves, and therefore are struggling to relate to pain in others. Also, those that are very, very sort of cognitive in their head and out of touch with their heart. You know, some people live from here up. Yeah. They're not aware of their body and they're not aware of their emotions, and they find it very hard to even feel compassion because their coping mechanism is to rationalize or conceptualize things. So I don't think compassion is easy to train. I think it comes through experience, but also if people are prepared to become more self-aware and get feedback from others, especially from their team. You know, if their team finds that they lack compassion and they're in a leadership role and they're prepared to ask their team for feedback, it could be quite a good wake-up call in terms of how they can increase their awareness and compassion. So we've got a question from Miriam. Compassion and the immune system. Why does the immune system graph first go down and then up again? Actually, the graph goes up first and then down and then up. So any intense emotion, because your body thinks you're still a caveman, any intense emotion sparks it initially. So you'll have an increase in T killer cell production, because your body thinks there's a lion coming to bite you. So any intense emotion, even if it's positive, sparks the immune system. And then it starts to dip as you start to realize what's going on. And then it starts going up as it starts to recover. So it dips down from the initial response, and then there's sense making that happens, and then it starts to recover, but it doesn't quite recover from 5 minutes of anger, and it ends up in a weaker place than where it starts. Okay. We've got another 5 minutes. Let me see what we have. Yeah, so the other question is about CBT, that's cognitive-based therapy that we offer broadly here in the UK. It's part of the NHS, actually. And the question is, do you think that CBT should be available within organizations? Absolutely. CBT training is actually reframing training. It's the ability to reframe, to look at your thoughts and emotions and to see how you can reframe and rewire the brain. So I would completely say that it would be wonderful if we could make it available in organizations. How do you suggest an introvert copes with all the video call meetings? You know, at Ashridge, a lot of us as faculty are actually introverts, and they've enjoyed actually not being face-to-face all the time with people, not having to travel so much, be at dinner parties with people. But absolutely, introverts need alone time. I'm actually an introvert myself. And I know that if I don't take at least one full day where I leave my phone at home and I go into that forest and I recharge my battery, I'm completely doomed the next day. So introverts need to be very strict about boundaries, switching off. And also another tip is to make sure that there's 10 minutes between meetings, that you don't go from one Zoom call straight onto another Zoom call, but that you schedule your meetings with 10-minute breaks and that you're actively during those 10 minutes, go outside, do 10 push-ups, have a cup of tea, connect with nature, do something completely different. Don't take your phone with you. I would say that it's almost a more disciplined practice needed for introverts. There's another question about what's the difference between resilience and self-blame. I struggle with self-blame. I think that's the black widow, right? The self-blame is, it's my fault. I should be feeling different. I should be being different. And it starts with self-blame, and that reduces resilience. I think that's the link between the two. And the starting point here is to start becoming aware of the thoughts and the emotions and to say, how can I think differently? So my strong suggestion here is to have that morning practice where you just take a breath and say, okay, what are my thoughts? What am I ruminating about? Especially in the morning, and especially as you fall asleep at night, become aware of the thoughts. And then focus the thoughts on something, on things that you are grateful for. And that almost, you know, resilience is almost like a muscle. Like you go to the gym and you develop a muscle in the gym. Resilience is an emotional muscle. The more you do it, the stronger that muscle becomes. It's a daily practice of discipline. If I didn't sit down and do that practice, and it's easy to skip it because everything else comes first, right? If I force myself every morning to sit there and say, let me tune in, let me breathe, put on a meditation. There's some wonderful apps. A big one that I love is called Insight Timer, where you can meditate and with hundreds of people at the same time. It's a live thing. Or even Mind Time is another big one. Headspace. Start to develop these mindfulness activities where you tune in with what you're thinking and feeling and noticing the self-blame, and then consciously saying, how do I want to think? How do I want to feel today? Make that your daily practice. Then another person said, what would you recommend company leaders do to reduce the anxiety or uncertainty in their employees? I think I've covered that in that last slide with some of the practices that HR can do through providing a resilience framework. And we can certainly help with that at Ashridge. If you could just contact me, I can talk you through some of the things that leaders can do. What we can do in how we run our team meetings, the counseling and coaching, the CBT, the resilience framework, the ability to be able to give people spaces where they can talk through their anxiety, sense-making forums, how they're responding to COVID. Do you have opportunities for people to just talk about that in your organization? But very happy to share more if you would just reach out to me on LinkedIn or send me an email. Somebody's asked for a link to the webinar. Yes, it's been recorded. We'll send a link to everybody. Okay, I think we've reached the end of our time. I'm just going to close this, and I'm going to share with you my email address. I am on LinkedIn. I'd love to hear from you. We have a lot of resilient leadership work that we do at Ashridge. We have an open program, and we have custom programs, and we also have coaching programs. So please do follow the link that will be sent to you in the chat box. And there's my email address. If you could please reach out and we continue the conversation. I hope you enjoyed the session. It was wonderful to be with you. Please stay in touch, and I wish you a wonderful Christmas and a good break. Thank you.